All right, welcome back, everybody. It's time. Well, let me just share something here. Everywhere I go right now, if someone finds out that I'm in the real estate industry, I don't sell houses anymore, and I'm getting bombarded.
It's crazy.
With the question, how's the market?
Yeah.
Like, insane. Are you finding the same thing?
I took my car in to get serviced the other day, and the guy, like the shuttle driver guy, first question,
Yep.
what do you do?
Yep.
I'm in real estate, kind of.
Yeah.
And for like right after that, how's the market? What's going on? I heard it's not good. CMHC, like just drilling into me. And it's like, okay.
Everybody.
Yeah.
And we always joke that this is the number one question you're going to get asked in real estate, and you need to be masterful at answering it for various reasons. One of the reasons is people might genuinely be interested in how's the market.
Yeah.
They may be interested in selling or buying, and they're judging you. They're sort of like, this is like a little mini interview.
Yeah.
And if you have some sort of, stock response of like, oh, my favorite one is it's unbelievable, because it's always unbelievably great
awesome.
or unbelievably horrible. You're right either way.
Yeah.
So, if you have something like that, or you're just like, oh, the market is horrible. Well, who wants to work with someone like that?
you?
Yeah, exactly.
Come on.
So how you answer this question is very, very important. So practice. But right now, in times of COVID and uncertainty, you need to be updating how you're answering this.
Yeah. So my biggest piece of advice, no matter what is happening in the market, is be honest and be transparent and don't fluff it. Agents are notoriously bad for just fluffing. Like,
So
it's
true.
great, this is awesome. Which is, it's good to have a positive attitude. Don't get me wrong. I believe that.
Yeah.
But if you fluff it too much, you're going to end up in our next segment, which is dealing with a stale listing.
Yeah.
Because they're just going to inflate their idea of what's going on out there, and it's not necessarily true. So honesty is number one.
Or if they've been reading the paper, then they're just like, you're a liar.
Yeah.
Like you're an idiot. You're totally uneducated on this.
Yeah.
And that's a problem as well. And I always use the example of, go to a restaurant or something like that, and you ask them what's good, and they're like, oh, everything's good. Well, so okay, well, fine. Like
I want your top two. Come
Yeah,
on.
exactly. And I want to know what you guys don't specialize in. Well, we're Red Lobster, so maybe the steaks aren't great. I don't know if steaks are good or not at Red Lobster. Don't mean to pigeonhole Red Lobster, but you know what I mean, right? It's like whatever it happens to be. So I want to show you, and then Chloe, you have some awesome ideas to speak to, including to Be Authentically. I want to show you guys one quick education piece that we have used before as part of the Bachelor program in Module 1. So this is available in the virtual office. You can just go to the Bachelor program section. It's in Module 1. You can see it here. Addie, if you can pull up my screen. But this is basically a simple template and guide about answering how's the market. Here's what we recommend, and then we'll dive a bit deeper into this. Number one, just like Chloe said, answer it authentically with solutions. So you're going to give sort of a 30-second blurb, and you don't have to start with this, but 30 seconds, what's going on generally, and don't whitewash it. Don't give fluff.
Yeah.
Number two, you're asking questions. You're listening for change. You're trying to learn about them. Number three, offer them something compelling. Hey, why don't I send you a list of everything that's sold in your community? Hey, we do a preferred client update. Why don't I fire it off to you? It actually speaks to that. Why don't we come over to a real estate review or a home investment review, find out where it's at? All this kind of stuff, you're trying to engage with them and maybe remove the relationship to the next step. If they're genuinely curious, maybe you don't. And that's number four. Optional is continue the conversation. If they want to talk more about it, or they were just trying to be polite, you find out here. And then we give some suggestions about how to answer authentically, some questions to ask, and how to offer them something compelling. What will help them understand the market in their community, things like that. So thank you so much, Addie. Chloe, take us through some other points now in the situation that we're at. What do people have to remember?
So I think the biggest thing here is that this should be a conversation, not a one-way dialogue on word vomit of everything that's happening in the market. So it's important that you guys recognize that this is a really good opportunity to get to know whoever the person is that you're talking to. The answer to this question is going to vary wildly between people. I mean, the person who bought a condo downtown in 2014 The answer to how's that market is going to be wildly different than someone who purchased a home in Willow Park in the 1980s and is prime for a flip.
Yeah.
Because those markets are so different. And you wouldn't be giving yourself or the person justice if you just gave a general response. So it's a really good opportunity to say, what community do you live in? Or what part of the city do you live in? Or, what do you think it's like, so that you can understand what their expectations for your answer is too, so that you can, frame your answer around what their expectations might be. If they're watching Selling Sunset or Sunset Sell, what is that show called?
Selling Sunset.
Yeah.
I think. Asking for a friend.
You love all the trash TV.
It's true.
It's your guilty pleasure. I think.
It is. At 4 in the morning when I'm feeding my baby.
But if they're watching HGTV or whatever it is, or the CMHC reviews, like, those are two very different messages that we're hearing out there, and depending on what they hear and where their property is and what they have to sell, very different answers.
Well, and this is where we talked about, you need to understand micro markets.
Yeah.
You need to understand in the price ranges that you're trading in, that the areas are in, that the market could be totally different.
Yeah.
Like if you're talking about, detached homes in, Country Hills, and they're selling for, $450 or something like that, those markets are flying off the shelves in a lot of cases.
Yep.
Oh, you're in Elbow Valley and you want, $2.3 million for your home. You're probably going to wait for a little while for a buyer. Like, that's just the way that some of these markets go.
Yeah.
And even then, there's still people looking at them. It's not like zero homes are selling. It's just a lot more competitive.
Yeah.
There's always people in some of these communities waiting for that right house to come up, whether it's lakefront or on a ravine or wherever else it happens to be. There's always people looking for that, but the pricing still has to be right. So you need to understand and be paying attention to micro markets now more than ever. And I love what you said about making it a conversation, ask them questions, because if you ask the question, it's like, well, how's the market? Well, what community are you in? And it's like, oh, I'm in Riverbend. Okay, well, that's, a very, sort of medium priced community. Like it's so the stuff there on, good properties is going to be just fine. Like it's going to go. And it depends. You're talking about a downtown condo. Well, you got to be aggressive because there's some inventory there and you're competing with new inventory. So it's a totally different piece. Yeah,
I agree. I think one of the biggest things, the piece of that is also when they purchased, because the up and down of Calgary that we've all experienced, and if you haven't, you will experience it, because this is how we are in Calgary, up and down. If they bought in an up and were in a down, well, they need to understand that difference, but also the other way around. So if they bought when their property was worth $100,000 and now it's worth $500,000, that's awesome.
Yeah.
Like, no matter what market we're in right now, like, that is great. However, with an asterisk, if they've experienced an up and they think their house is worth $600,000, and in their head $600,000, but you come in at $500,000, but they bought for $100,000, they need to understand, like, that $100,000 that was hypothetical monopoly money, if you will. It's how is it relevant to them? And understanding what their next move is also a piece of that puzzle, because if they're buying and selling in the same market, or if they're selling here and moving to Toronto, where they're going to be possibly experiencing some major changes in the market, that also comes into play with the relevancy of the conversation.
And I love, even understanding the different buyer types. Like, you could ask the question, maybe the next question you ask is, well, what community do you live in? They say, oh, I'm actually not thinking about myself. My brother-in-law lives in Winnipeg and is actually looking for a place to invest.
Yeah.
And he's looking to pick up some more investment properties. And then, we just talked about Natasha holding this course for that exact thing, where 90% of her clients this year, and she's doing a lot of business, one of our top producers, and she's doing it from people coming in and spending their money in Calgary to invest, to buy up properties.
Yeah.
Because the economics and, things like that, like there's positive news for Trans Mountain, there's, things like that, these pipelines. And so, but people are looking to invest, and their money goes a long way.
Yeah.
A long way. You try to buy an investment property in Vancouver, and see how far your money goes.
Well, and that's just the thing is like, again, it's all irrelevant. So they may not be able to purchase in that market at all, but they still want to put their money in real estate. So
yeah. Another thing to pay attention to, just as to further extend this a little bit here, is what are the economists saying? And you'll find the different opinions. And it's like, so CMHC said it's down 18%. Well, read between the lines of that. Why do they say that? Well, because Toronto, Vancouver were overinflated. So then prices are probably going to come down in those communities. Are they even right about those? Probably not. But that's not, doesn't speak to Calgary. Or did somebody else say, did RBC say, we expect it to go down by 5%? We expect the rental market to do this. We expect interest rates to stay historically low. We expect incentives to do this, or whatever it happens to be. If you understand these things, then you're able to speak to the different areas that people are talking about and the different types of buyers that people are looking at. And that's it. And they've read the news, lots of them have, or they've heard about it. So it's important to understand. But then when you say, people are like, whoa, it's really hurting. Well, June saw the most sales, that we had ever. And the amount of competing offers that we saw out there was insane.
And agents who haven't dealt with competing offers in a long time, had lots of questions come in about that too. So
totally.
Yeah.
The other thing I just want to talk to for a second here before we move on to the next segment here is make sure you understand the flaw with average price. This is absolutely critical. I've written articles on this. I've done videos on this. Calgary right now has the benefit of the HPI, the home price index, which is a better marker than going off of the average. But whether you're in Lethbridge or Red Deer or Kem or someplace that doesn't have the HPI yet, they are working on it as part of Pillar 9. These are some of the group benefits we're trying to get here. So they're working on it. It's not there yet. But average price takes in composition of what is sold. So if you have a month where, let's say, 1,000 properties sell, and you take that there was, 50 multi-million-dollar listings, or let's say 100 properties over 700,000, and then the next month there was only 10 properties over 700,000. It's a huge adjustment in average price.
Yeah.
But it's not a good indicator because the condo prices probably didn't change. The typical single-family home prices probably didn't change. The only difference was that since less, lower-priced homes and more upper-priced homes sold, that's called composition, that it affected the average price. So average price is not a good indicator of the actual true prices of individual properties changing. It's more of an indication of which homes sold in which price categories. Yeah. So looking at that in marketplaces, especially when you start talking about communities that have fewer sales, the smaller the data set, the more off this number becomes. And if you can recognize that, if you can show by pulling the communities that you specialize in, and you say, in this community, we actually haven't seen a price drop. Homes like this are still selling for exactly what they sold for last year. Or, when we look at the benchmark price in Calgary, it's down 2%, average price 8%. Wow. So when you look at the difference, someone's like, oh, it's down 8%. And you're talking to a seller or a buyer that wants to put in a lowball offer. You're like, actually, au contraire, it's actually only down by just under 2%. Yeah. And then people are like, oh my gosh. And in some communities, it's even up. So you just got to look at some of the desirable areas. So make sure you understand the difference in average price. Yeah.
And if you are in Calgary and have access to HPI, it is a good starting point. I wouldn't rely on it solely to understand what's going on in that market, but it is a good starting point as a snapshot to see what's happening in that price point and community and product that you're looking at. Do we want to talk about absorption rate? I know that we mentioned it earlier. Briefly?
No. Yes. Okay. Yeah, we can. We can just. My only other point on this is make sure the other things you're watching is months of inventory or absorption rate. We use them synonymously here in Alberta. So months of inventory equals absorption rate, et cetera. But the gist is if nothing else were to come on the marketplace at the current pace of sales, how long would it take to sell every single listing on the market? Yeah. So that's the premise. So every segment of the market has different levels of absorption rate. So don't look at Calgary or Red Deer or Lethbridge and can try to compare the two to say which one is fast or which one is slow. Because if you're in an area that is acreages or multi-million-dollar homes or land deals or something like that, absorption rates could be a year. They could be like, 10 months, and that's normal. Yeah. That doesn't mean prices are going down just because, and you'll hear people in the US say, typical balanced market is 6 months. Well, in Alberta,
across the board, it's just such a blanket statement. It's
As a general rule for the metropolitan areas in Alberta, that's way too high.
Yeah,
it's like that's a seller's market every day of the week.
And
buyer's market every day.
Part of that is an emotional feeling that clients have that you just have to understand. Like, some markets are going to be different. Like, in some areas, people will be okay with it taking 6 months and there's no urgency behind that changes price and whatnot. But in Calgary, if you said absorption rate was 6 months, that doesn't feel like a balanced market here, because it's just not what we're used to. The change in absorption rate is what is a really good, affects pricing. So if we go from an absorption rate of 7 months to 4 months, that's a pretty significant change.
Yes.
And vice versa. So just be aware of that and educate yourself on absorption rates.
Absolutely. And I can speak on absorption. This isn't a stats class. We'll move on. I can keep going on that. We got other stuff to talk about. So that's that. Overall, in summary on this, don't fluff it. Don't provide fluff. Give them the real hard facts. Make sure you understand there's opportunities with every different type of client segment. To Chloe said, you want to get to know this person, ask questions in order to do that, and understand the micro markets. Understand that how's the market is not the same for every segment. It's not the same, overall. No. So just make sure that you are educating clients on the specific areas they're interested in.
Yep.
All right. We'll be right back. And we're going to talk about giving new life to stale listings.